Hello, and welcome to the Astrology channel. I am Joe G. I am an astrologer, and I'm with my good friend Kyle, who is also an astrologer. Hi, Kyle.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. We're talking outer planets today. We're getting outside of our regular schedule. Fancy spinoff. I just love calling it a spinoff because it makes it sound so much more legit. Uh,
Yeah.
But this is the show where we keep track of the outer planets because on our regular horoscopes, we keep track of the 7 days of the week, and each of the days of the week has a planet that it's related to. The outer planets kind of fall out of that order. So we have to take a step back to look at them, which is what we're doing. We're looking today at Uranus ingressing into Saturn's bounds in Taurus. If you don't know what the bounds are, they're just this tiny little division in the zodiac that's irregular and weird, but cool as hell. Yes, with that, let's get right into it. So Uranus is in Taurus, it's retrograde, is in Saturn's decadent terms, soon being received by the moon through a sextile, through element and exaltation. And also Saturn, the bound ruler, is in the 11th house from Uranus.
Well, so, with Uranus, you're always kind of getting innovations, disruptions of the routine, the willingness to break out of the normal in order to reveal, what needs to come next, what's latent and asking to be birthed into the world, which can be, naturally a disruptive thing, especially when it's in Taurus, which is all about stability, stable, fixed, earthy things. And you might see a bit more of that in Saturn's bound because Saturn deals with things that are along and in some cases unbreakable or unbending. It's like death. We cannot overthrow death as much as we may try. So I can't help but focus a bit on the fact that Uranus is still hanging out by Algol, which if you want to learn a bit more about Algol, you can watch our world famous Algol video, which goes very in depth on the subject. But I think it poses an interesting combination where we're in Saturn's bound. We're trying to offset things that can go wrong on the material plane, trying to prevent death and decay for as long as possible. And Uranus wants to overturn the order on the whole system, which a lot of that is not stuff that we can really flip. We can't change the whole game with a lot of these topics. Some of that energy could pose a risk for possibly throwing things out that worked well or mostly worked in the past, when maybe what we really need to do is tweak or adjust things within that system or that process. Or maybe you don't need to totally quit your day job. Maybe you need a lateral promotion or change what you're doing within that context. I feel like the need to totally reinvent things is a little out of place, especially in this part of Taurus.
Yeah, it's interesting because Taurus is it's a sign that's ruled by Venus. It's the exaltation of the moon. It's all about growth and maintenance, and it feels like such good vibes. Then you get to the end of Taurus, and it's like not good vibes at all.
Yeah.
And I always like to think about that as kind of like the journey of planting something. Like if you're gardening or if you're planting whatever, usually you want to plant more seeds than you actually need because not all of those seeds will survive. And I think that at this end of Taurus, we're really dealing with, we're addressing death and that process of birthing something. Like the things that didn't make the cut or the things that were not the best, or you can call it like natural selection, if you will. And I feel like that might be a little bit of what Uranus might be getting pointed towards in this moment. In the image, I have this old man in this neon sort of room looking at this metal stake and just like really thinking about it and kind of looking indifferent, kind of just pondering, what is this all about? Like, why a metal stake? Can we eat it? Can we not eat it? And this is not a commentary on fake meats and stuff like that. I used to be vegan for years. I have really nothing against it. But I think it's one of those things where we're seeing maybe the innovations or the new ideas, or especially in this era where AI is just kind of like running rampant, we might be seeing what actually like kind of dies in a bubble. Because this whole AI thing, it is a bubble. At one point, it's going to explode. And some companies will continue to thrive, others will not. I think that Uranus retrograding into that section of Taurus, and kind of really dealing with Saturn's bounds again might show us who those winners and who those losers might be. I think that it's interesting that Saturn is in the 11th house from Uranus. It really is like looking at the network of inventors, or the network of ideas, or the network of global innovations, and seeing who still makes it in the list, who's still cool, who's not cool, who actually has good intentions that will make a change in the world, and which ones are just there to be there because it's a cool idea now, but it won't be tomorrow.
I think you're actually on point with a lot of things. The fake meat is an interesting idea to play with a little bit, just because, if you're trying to make things more sustainable, if you're trying to make Earth last longer or like feed more people, despite all the problems that can happen, how metal meat, well, that doesn't rot. That actually will last a long time, but does it actually feed? How do
Yeah.
we make that feed people?
It's got a whole lot of iron.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's loaded it up with
But
preservatives.
that's like,
How do we make that not give people cancer? That could be the more constructive use, which I don't even do we even know to what degree that like we don't know a lot of how these things have effects, and we have a lot of different opinions about whether or not we should even use them, and like not weighing in on that. It's that there's sort of an opportunity to have like the product testing take place in like the Saturn's bound. Like, well, this actually works. This actually doesn't, which I think could be useful. The stakes kind of get high, I think, at the end of any sign, but when we're dealing with fixed Earth, right? We're dealing with like what feeds people, like what the land that we live on, and we're messing with those systems. It can be high risk, high reward to some degree, but like you're playing with things that like nature only changes over the course of eons, right? Which I'm not against, finding new ways to make those processes work for us, but you know, the bigger the changes you make in those kind of spaces, the more potentially rewarding those results can be, but also the more risky they can be. If you're trying to overturn like a supply chain on food and like reinvent a whole new one, it's not usually something you want to just wipe out and replace with a whole new system before you've like product tested it.
Mhm.
So hopefully we're not seeing too many big systems or organizations that have been in place for a long time get thrown out without enough to replace them with stably.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to that's a good segue into like advice segment, I guess is what we're calling it. Because I think that's the thing that us, like the tiny little people that make up this larger world that we're talking about, can do, is really assessing some of those things in our lives, some of the ideas that we've had in the past little while, and some of the big changes that we've made, and really be honest with yourself with what gets to stay and what needs to go. But again,
Mhm.
like kind of keeping in mind that this is not just get rid of this thing without having a solid replacement. I guess some things will be in that sort of vein where some things really just need to go, and it's whatever, they'll just go. But it's good to use this Uranus retrograde to just revisit some of those decisions and see like maybe the things that you thought were not important or did not have a space in your life anymore actually might have that space. Maybe it's time to bring those back. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe there's things that you did fully subscribe to, you really just jumped into that idea, but it didn't work for you. And I think that this is a good moment to just address those things.
I think especially with Algol's involvement, there can be like a disgust with the whole system and like wanting to just dip out of it that Uranus can really inflame. I think a lot of people are just going to want to go off grid, like live in the forest and, which may be the answer for some people. But if that's something you're contemplating, like, do you have the skills to survive in that sort of scenario? Is there actually space that will provide all the things you need? There's a lot of things to factor in and whole systems that need to be built within that context for yourself or for anything. So like really thinking those things through and not just jumping into something because you need to relieve that impulse to change. It's a tricky place for Uranus to be. It's not the most natural fit. So, sitting with things for a long time, Taurus style, you still got to do Taurus for your Taurus planets that might be being hit by Uranus. I end up seeing a lot of like pharmaceutical stuff going on in the last decade of Taurus. So I would just advise caution against like, some new treatment that cures everything. Like pharmaceutical panaceas would be something to like watch out for. Make sure they've been thoroughly tested before you subscribe, and maybe manage your expectations about the results.
Cool. Well, I think that the biggest thing for this transit then is just to, I guess, remain skeptical, or not even skepticism, just, I guess, skepticism. A healthy dose of skepticism with Saturn, I think, is always good. Saturn, we being the ruler of the bounds. But I think that that's it for today. If you have any questions about Uranus and this whole ordeal, please leave them in the comments. We're here for you. If you are curious about this week, we do have our weekly horoscope coming up very soon. You just subscribe and stay tuned for whenever that comes out. But that is all. Uranus will be staying in this or until May 13-ish, May 14, depending on where you are. So there's a lot of time to have some of these reflections around these innovations and changes that the world and you are going through. So take your time with it. It's not something that you have to do today or tomorrow.
Take your time with it. It's the most important takeaway.
Yeah, totally. Well, I hope this was helpful for you guys. And with that, we'll see you very soon.
See you next time.
Bye.